In 1816, when the Roman Catholic Bishop of Waterford, John Power, died, his service and funeral was attended by the Protestant Bishop of Waterford and all the Protestant clergy. They also collected funds to have a memorial put up to him in the Roman Catholic Cathedral in Barnstrand Street. It can be seen down there to the present day. It's hard to believe that when our first President of Ireland, Douglas Hyde, died, the Catholic Church at that time, that's the 1940s, had a ban on Catholics attending Protestant services. So you had the farcical situation of the body of the first President of Ireland in St Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin, and all of the government of Ireland outside standing on the footpath. One Waterford-born TD Diggory, that was Noel Brown. Erskine Childers, who was a son of the executed 1916 leader, also Erskine Childers. Erskine Childers was later to become another President of Ireland. They went in because Erskine Childers was a Protestant. What happened to change the Catholic-Protestant relations that existed in 1816 when marriage between Protestant Catholics were no problem? When Edmund Rice shared the treasurership of a local charity with Quakers and Protestants? How did the Roman Catholic Church become intolerant of everyone else's view except their own? In today's story, we see a church that behaves like a playground bully and rules like a spoiled child. And now to our story. On April the 21st, 1967, a monument was erected on the quay opposite the Granville Hotel, still there. It's in memory of the men who died fighting for Irish freedom. The statue is a marble statue of the Sacred Heart. Now, I often wondered why it was the Sacred Heart. And not like up in Wexford in Enniscorthy, they have a fabulous monument up there to an IRA volunteer complete with a gun and uniform, and also they have fabulous monuments of pikemen up around Wexford. And why not in Waterford? Well, it was only when I saw the speech of Padraig de Burke, who was chairman of the Waterford Memorial Committee. He gave a speech on the day of the erection of the Sacred Heart statue. And he said, "As our blessed Lord was called to suffer, so too were the men of 1916. He also remarked that no matter what their political affiliations, they all owed him, that is the Sacred Heart, their affiliation." Now, this may seem strange to anybody under 50 years of age, but in Waterford, and indeed Ireland, after the foundation of the Free State, the Roman Catholic Church sought to have increasing more influence on society. In fact, in the treaty negotiations of 1921 between the Republicans and the English, the main intermediary was a Roman Catholic Archbishop, Dr. Clune of Perth. He was Irish, but he was a home ruler. He was certainly no Republican. At that time, Irish people had a sense of guilt about everything. Indeed, in my youth, it was a religion of don'ts. Don't do this, don't do that. If you kissed a girl, we believed it was a sin. If you looked at a girl, it was a venial sin. As one local joke quipped, that sex was not a sin as long as you didn't enjoy it. We went to confession every week to be reminded how bad we were and to beg forgiveness. It was Mass every Sunday, the Rosary every night, and benediction several times a week. We belonged to the Legion of Mary and Men's Sodalities, and at our confirmation we took the pledge. The missioners came around every year to tell us that we'd all go to hell if we didn't behave ourselves. It is in that setting that our story begins. In the 1930s, many of the Republican movement and the IRA began to court socialism and communism. In 1934, there was a split in the IRA, and out of that was formed the Republican Congress. Many of the Waterford local IRA lads supported the Republican Congress because they were working class. Towards the end of 1934, there was a strike by building workers in the city, which was supported by the Republican Congress. Now, this impacted on a new extension which was being built at Mount St School. Republican Congress supported the building strikers. They also tackled the question of some landlords in Waterford. Now, Archdeacon Burden, who was the parish priest of Ballybricken, was co-manager of Mount St Christian Brother Schools, along with a Christian brother called Brother Flannery. Some of the slum property that the Republican Congress investigated in Waterford was managed by Archdeacon Byrne. Now, I have to explain here, that wasn't Archdeacon Byrne's property, nor was it belonged to the church. It was a local charity who put the burden, I should say, on the parish priest of Ballybricken to collect the funds. Because you see, going back in the 1700s, many wealthy Waterford people set up foundations and charities, and which really consisted of houses or property, and the rents off of those properties would go for the upkeep of an old folks' home. It was as simple as that, and the parish priests of Ballybricken were lumbered with this. Frank Edwards would not have been aware at the time that this was Archdeacon Byrne's problem, shall we say. Frank Edwards' major sin obviously was to have mentioned the property when the Republican Congress investigated. The building strike ended after 5 weeks, and Archdeacon Byrne warned all and sundry not to become involved in any socialist or communist organisation. Frank Edwards was a popular teacher at Mount Sion and was a member of the Republican Congress. When it became known that Frank Edwards was to attend a Republican Congress in Dublin, Archdeacon Byrne and Brother Flannery of Mount Sion told him if he attended, he would be sacked as a teacher in Mount Sion. Frank Edwards refused to be intimidated, nor would he sign a declaration that he would belong only to organisations to which the Catholic Church approved. In his own account of the episode, Frank Edwards said, "Following my return from Congress, I received 3 months' notice. In January 1935, the Roman Catholic Bishop of Waterford, Jeremiah Kinane, joined in the controversy, releasing a statement saying that if anyone who associated oneself with Republican Congress is not a fit and proper person to teach Catholic children." He also attacked the IRA and said that the Irish hierarchy in 1931 said that the IRA is a sinful and irreligious society and that it is a mortal sin for a Catholic to belong to it. The IRA issued a statement saying that Frank Edwards was not a member of the IRA, but that they supported him. The bishop also said that a socialist republic is not a legitimate form of government, and anyone who professes the principle on which it is based puts himself in opposition to God's law and to the teaching of the church. Now, it appears to me that the learned bishop was not familiar with the New Testament, and in particular the Acts of the Apostles, and even in more particular to Acts 4:32 to 35, where it reads, "The group of believers were of one heart," that is now the early Christians in Jerusalem. "None of them said that any of their belongings were their own, but they all shared everything they had with one another. There was no needy ones among them, because those who owned land or houses would sell their property and bring the proceeds from the sales and lay them at the apostles' feet for distribution to each according to his needs." Now, maybe I'm mistaken. That seems like communism to me. And what's good enough for the apostles should have been good enough for Bishop Kinane. On Saturday night, January the 12th, 1935, 1,000 people turned out in torrential rain in Broad Street to protest against the sacking of Jack Edwards. On Tuesday, the 15th of January, about 350 people, including students from Mount Sion carrying banners, lined up outside Mount Sion School on Barrack Street. It was claimed that 100 pupils had joined the strike, but this was denied by the school. But there were students there. There were 30 guards policing the crowd. The Munster Express of January the 18th published letters of allegiance and loyalty to the bishop. They came from the Ballybricken Pig Buyers Association, Fine Gael and most religious organisations in the city. At a later stage, even the Waterford Corporation pledged loyalty to the bishop. Even the Dockers Union, a group of men who prided themselves on being tough guys, also pledged loyalty to the bishop. It appears you could have an opinion as long as it was the Roman Catholic Church's opinion. It might surprise people that Fianna Fáil Cummins all around the country were in favour of Frank Edwards. Now, this was long before Fianna Fáil was seduced by big business, by the Galway tent, by Charlie in the Charvet shirts, and by Bertie and his dig out. The bishop was challenged by the Edwards Committee to unblock the ban he had put on Waterford papers reporting certain matters, because the bishop went around to the newspapers and the Congress committee said, look, we had a conversation with you, we want you to report, we want the papers to report that conversation, but the bishop blocked that particular conversation. On Sunday the 27th of January 1935, there was a meeting held by the IRA. Over 1,000 people attended, accompanied by bands. Despite the bishop saying that it was a grave sin for any Catholic to attend it, it was packed. After it was all over, Frank Edwards said, "Despite the tremendous support I received from every quarter, I was bested. I had to leave Waterford." But the treatment of Frank Edwards' mother is outrageous, and was outrageous. She had made a statement saying that despite everything, and remembering that she had lost a son, Jack Edwards, in the Civil War. He was imprisoned in Kilkenny jail, and he looked out the window of his cell, or of some part of the building, and a Free State sniper pointed his gun at him, fired, killing him instantly. Jack Edwards fell back, and some other Republican prisoners ran up to where he was. Some of them got pens, and you must remember those would have been the old nip pens, got their handkerchiefs, and wrote on the handkerchief in Jack Edwards' blood, Jack Edwards died for Ireland, some of them had, August the 19th, 1922. So Mrs. Edwards had recently faced that. Now she saw another son being dragged through the mire in Waterford City. But she said, despite it all, we're good Catholics. A priest was sent to her by the bishop and said, withdraw that statement publicly, or we will refuse to give you Holy Communion when you go to Mass. So it was absolutely terrible. Mrs. Edwards was a devout Catholic, and Frank Edwards said in his account of the occasion in a book called Survivors, "They would not leave my mother alone. She had a post as a public nurse. They boycotted her and she had to resign, dying shortly afterwards." But there were also clerical votes in favour and supporting Frank Edwards. Father Michael Flanagan, a Roman Catholic priest and president of Sinn Féin, he was a veteran Republican. He declared that his sympathy in Waterford was with the dismissed teacher. When the Spanish Civil War broke out on the 18th of July 1936, O'Flanagan was one of the only Irish Catholic priests to defend the Spanish Republican against the fascists, while the Catholic Church supported the fascists. Anyone over 60 will remember the water that I've spoken about very well. Anyone under 40 will scratch their heads and say, what? Was it really like this? My answer is yes, it was. And it didn't get better until recent years. Now, to be a socialist or a communist doesn't presuppose that you have to be an atheist. Anybody can be a communist or a socialist. You can have a Catholic socialist. You can have a Muslim socialist. You can have a Buddhist socialist. The church alienated good men who were concerned about their fellow men, all in the name and their interpretation of Christianity. But Bishop Kinane and his successor, Dr. Collin, had much more to worry about than Frank Edwards, when in 1945, 4 archbishops, 22 bishops from all 26 dioceses, north and south, met in Maynooth to discuss a particular problem. And that problem was that the bishops were so alarmed at the scale of clerical scandals that they were receiving daily on their desks, that they went to extraordinary steps to deliberately conceal from the faithful the true purpose for which troublesome priests were being sent to a treatment centre in Waterford. The bishops who had to deal with the problem was Bishop Jeremiah Kinane, he had been gone at that start, and Dr. Collin, who was Bishop of Waterford at the time. None of this, of course, was shared with the Roman Catholics of Waterford. So what happened to Frank Edwards? Well, Frank went to fight against the fascists in the Civil War on the Republican side against General Franco when he toppled the legitimately elected government of Spain. The Roman Catholics, as I said, supported Franco. On his return to Ireland, he eventually secured a teaching post in Mount Zion Jewish School in Rathgar. It was a Jewish school, where he taught until his retirement. He had completed his journey from Mount Zion to Mount Zion. He died on the 17th of June 1983, and his remains were cremated at Glasnevin. He's buried there. In a graveside oration, Peadar O'Donnell, veteran Republican and Socialist, said that Frank Edwards will become a legend, and his legend and his name will live on after most of us here are forgotten. And I am delighted to be able to remember him in this short video. Now, all my life I followed the example of a 2nd century philosopher, even though I only discovered him in recent years. And the advice that he wrote, and it's very important that everyone, and perhaps it could have been the saviour of the Irish people if they had known it and taken note. One ought first to follow reason as a guide before accepting any belief, since one who believes without testing the doctrine is certain to be deceived. I'll leave it at that. See you in the next video. Now, at the end of the video, I'm going to put up some links where you can get some further reading on Frank Edwards. It's a story worth reading, and there was an excellent article done on it in Dishes 58, a local historical journal, by a local man, David Smith. And of course, there's a book also out that every Waterford home should have, and that's by another Waterford man, Dr. Emmett O'Connor, and his father was Peter O'Connor, who fought on the Republican side with Frank Edwards in the Spanish Civil War. Manus O'Riordan also had an excellent article on Frank Edwards. All those, the books will be going up at the end of the video so you can browse it. And lovely talking to you. See you in the next video. Thank you.